The stars above Varelia 7 shimmered like diamonds. The alien world was covered with crystal towers, floating gardens, and silent glowing rivers. This was the capital of the Ixari Empire place, where thousands of species had come to beg, offer peace, or ask for alliance. But all of them were turned away. At the center of this silent empire sat Queen Aravex, the ruler of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. Her skin shimmered like silver marble. Her eyes were bright and cold, like distant suns. She had ruled for over 700 years. Many called her a goddess. Others called her a ghost. No one dared to speak to her directly unless invited. She had rejected every planet's proposal. She didn't care for treaties, power sharing, or emotional talk. Her people respected her for it. The queen was unbreakable, heartless, always alone. That was about to change, eh? New delegation had just arrived from a small blue planet on the edge of the known systems. Earthworth. It wasn't the first time humans had sent messages to the Ixari Empire. They had tried before. Letters, ambassadors, even music, all ignored. But this time, Earth had sent something different. They sent Captain Elias Ward. Elias stood silently in the Grand Hall of Light, where the Queen's meetings were held. The hall was made of glowing glass. Alien creatures floated above him, robotic. Guards lined the walls. Strange symbols danced in the air. Elias wore a clean black uniform. His medals were few but earned in real battles. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He looked like someone who had seen many wars and survived them all. He didn't look nervous. That made him different. The Queen sat on her throne high above. Her face was calm, cold. Watching the human diplomats around Elias started their speech. They spoke about peace, trade, culture. They praised the Queen's empire and offered Earth's friendship. The Queen didn't move. She had heard this kind of talk thousands of times. Flattery, begging, deals that meant nothing to her. But then Elias looked up. Their eyes met. It was only for a moment. But something happened. The Queen blinked. Later that evening, in her private garden, Queen Aravex stood quietly near a glowing tree. The air was filled with the sound of soft alien birds and a river flowing with silver light. Her main advisor, a tall creature with a head like a starfish, spoke. "Why did you let the humans stay, my queen? You always reject visitors after the first speech." Aravex didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about that human soldier. "His name?" she asked. "Captain Elias Ward," the advisor replied. "War hero from the outer colonies, no family, no attachments. Fought in the Tyros conflict. Saved over 300 civilians." Aravex tilted her head. "He didn't speak today," she said. "Double quotes, no, my queen, he only watched." To her advisor, "Invite him," she said. "Alone, I wish to see what makes him silent." The next day, Elias was brought into the Queen's private chamber. He bowed respectfully, but not too low. He didn't look afraid, just respectful. "You are a soldier," the Queen said. "Yes," Elias replied. "You have seen death?" "Too much." "And still, you chose to come here? To speak for your people?" Elias nodded. "I wasn't sent to speak. I was sent to listen." That answer surprised her. Most ambassadors only wanted to talk, to convince. But Elias seemed ... different. "Do you think your planet is special?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I think it still matters." That silence between them was deep. Not awkward. Just full, then. Aravex did something she hadn't done in years. She invited him to walk in her garden. They walked slowly among glowing plants and floating lights. Elias didn't ask questions. He only observed. "Why do you reject every offer?" He asked finally. "Because all of them are the same," she answered. "They want power, safety, or control. None of them offer honesty." "Maybe they're afraid," Elias said. "Fear is weakness," the Queen replied. "Or maybe fear is just a sign of caring," Elias said softly. "You fear losing something because it means something to you." Aravex stopped walking. sentence stayed in her mind like an echo. No one had said something like that to her before. Later that night, Aref sat alone, watching a star map above her. She zoomed in on Earth. She remembered Elias's calm eyes, the way he didn't try to impress her, the way he spoke with meaning, not performance. She had seen thousands of beings, scientists, kings, generals. All of them tried too hard. But this human, he had said little, and somehow that meant more. She spoke quietly to herself. He didn't try to win me. That is why I noticed him. And for the first time in centuries, the Queen of Silence didn't feel so alone. The sky of Varelius 7 was calm, filled with slow-moving stars and floating ships. The Queen's palace stood tall like a mountain of crystal and light. Inside, everything was quiet. But something had changed. Queen Aravex, who once avoided visitors, ignored diplomats, rejected entire civilizations, had invited one human to stay longer. That human was Captain Elias Ward. He had not asked for anything. He had not praised her empire. He had only listened. And his silence had made more noise in the Queen's heart than any speech. The next day, the Queen sent a message to Elias. "You will join me in the Chamber of Trials." Most guests would panic at that message. The Chamber of Trials was where Aravex tested the minds and values of leaders. Many left in shame. Some refused the challenge. But Elias did not react. He simply replied, "Understood." The Chamber of Trials was hidden deep below the palace. The walls were made of living stone that changed shape. Inside, there were 3 parts: a battlefield simulation, a culture mirror, logic duel. 3 ways to see what a visitor truly believed. Queen Aravex watched from a floating platform. Her advisors stood around her. None of them believed a human could pass even one test. But she watched with interest, not hope. Just curiosity. Elias entered. He stood tall, hands behind his back, eyes focused. The first test began. In the battlefield simulation, Elias was dropped into a war zone. Digital enemies surrounded him. The rules were clear: win by killing all enemies or survive 5 minutes alone. Most beings tried to fight. Elias did not. He ran, dodged, used smoke, set traps, helped a wounded alien soldier, even though the rules did not say he must. At the end of 5 minutes, he had not killed a single enemy. But he had saved 2 hostages and escaped. Alive, the simulation ended. Aravex raised an eyebrow. "Interesting," she whispered. The second trial was called the Culture Mirror. Elias stood before a giant screen. It showed images from Earth, war, peace, love, sadness, laughter, pain, music, history. Then it showed images from Exori history: cold logic, perfect order, high science, emotionless decision-making. A voice asked, "Which world is better?" Elias did not answer right away. Then he said, "Neither is better. Both are incomplete. That's why we need each other." Silence followed. Queen Aravex leaned forward. Her eyes stayed on him. He had passed again. The final test was the logic duel. Aravex herself entered the stage. The test was mental now. She asked questions that twisted time, morality, and personal value. If your enemy saves your life, do you owe them peace? If your planet could be saved by harming one innocent life, would you do it? Is strength when everyone is already afraid of you? Elias answered each question carefully. Not to impress her, but to be honest. At the end, Aravex stood still. She spoke not to the room, but to Elias directly. "You think like a warrior, but you feel like a healer," Elias replied calmly. "I do both. Because in war, sometimes saving one life means more than ending 10. The tests were over. Elias bowed and turned to leave. He didn't ask how he had done, but as he reached the exit, the Queen said, "You will walk with me now." They walked through the moonlight garden, a place where no visitor had stepped in over 2 centuries. The flowers here changed color with emotions. Around Elias, they turned blue and green, calm and curious. Aravex looked at the flowers. Then at him you carry pain, she said. Elias nodded. Yes, you don't hide it.
No, you live with it. I have to.
Get the chance. What? That sentence hit her like a quiet storm. Later that evening, Aravex returned to her private chamber. She asked her AI assistant to show her footage from Elias's past. She saw images of burned-out cities, of him carrying children from a ruined colony, of him dragging a wounded enemy soldier to safety, even while being shot at. One moment stopped her breath. Elias, kneeling beside a dying comrade, holding the man's hand as he passed, whispering words of peace into his ear. There was no camera nearby. No crowd. Just a man choosing kindness when no one was watching. That night, Aravex stood by her window. She had ruled through logic for 700 years. She had rejected love, trust, and friendship. She believed peace was a lie and loyalty was weakness. But this human, he had passed every test, not with force, not with tricks. With heart, she whispered to herself, "Why do I feel something I had buried long ago?" She looked out at the stars. For the first time in her long life, the Queen of Silence was no longer sure of her silence. The throne room of Queen Aravex had never felt heavy before. But now, even the light from the crystal walls seemed slower, softer. She sat on her high throne, her silver gown flowing like liquid metal, her eyes fixed on a single name glowing on her private screen. Captain Elias Ward. A human. A soldier. Stranger. Yet something about him had pulled her attention in ways nothing had done for centuries. She had seen beings with beauty, strength, wisdom, but none had carried quiet courage like Elias. He didn't try to be noticed yet. She noticed him. He didn't ask to be trusted, yet she trusted his eyes. Queen Aravex summoned her advisor. "Bring the human. I have a question." Elias was brought again to her presence. This time the hall was empty. No guards, no officials. Just the queen and the soldier. He stood calmly as always. Aravex walked toward him slowly. "Why?" she asked without greeting. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Why? What?" She looked straight into his eyes. "Why did you save your enemy on the battlefield?" "I saw the footage. You risked your life for someone who tried to kill you," Elias answered after a short pause. "He was a soldier like me. He was following orders. That doesn't mean he deserved to die helpless." Aravex narrowed her eyes. "You believe mercy has value in war?" "Mercy is the only thing that separates us from machines," Elias replied. "War is never clean, but you can still choose to be human in the middle of it." That answer stayed in her mind like a quiet storm. Later that day, Aravex sat alone in her meditation chamber. She played Ilias's words again in her mind. You can still choose to be human. But she was not human. She was Ixeri descended from a long line of rulers who believed emotion was weakness. Still, something about Elias made her question it. She began reviewing more recordings of his past. His acts were consistent. He never used power for pride. He never acted with cruelty. Even in war, he chose to protect more than destroy. She whispered to herself, "Why does this human make me doubt myself?" That evening, Queen did something unexpected. She visited Elias in his temporary quarters. The guards outside straightened up in shock. No one could remember the last time the Queen had visited a guest in person. Elias stood as she entered. "Your Majesty," Aravex waved her hand. "No titles. Not here. Just speak with me." She sat down across from him, in a room that was small compared to her throne hall. No crystals, no floating lights, just a table and 2 chairs. "I wish to understand Earth," she said.
What?
"Your governments are machines, but you're ... people," Elias smiled gently. "You're asking the right person then. I've seen the best and worst of them." "Then tell me," she said, "why do your people risk their lives for strangers? Why do they love even when they know it brings pain?" Elias leaned back and thought, because love gives pain meaning. And risking something for someone else, that's how you prove you're alive. The Queen was silent for a long time. Then she said something no one expected from her. "I am tired of silence." The next day, the Queen invited Elias to join her at the Council of Stars, a meeting of her inner circle, made up of powerful Exori nobles, military leaders, and scientists. When Elias entered, the council was shocked. A human, sitting beside the queen? But Aravex didn't care what they thought. She began the meeting with calm words. "There is a reason I have rejected all alliances," she said. "I believed none were worthy. None could offer more than what I already had, until now."
Oh.
Eyes turned to Elias. One general stood up, his voice sharp. "With respect, my queen, how can a short-lived human be of value to our eternal empire?" Aravex did not smile, because he sees what we've forgotten. He speaks of mercy with power, of hope with scars, and he asks for nothing yet gives much. The room fell silent. Elias didn't speak. He just watched. Calm still, not proud, just. Present, after the council, Elias found Aravex in the garden again. She stood beneath a tall, glowing tree, the same one from their first walk. She looked at him and asked, "Why do you not try to impress me like the others?" "Because I'm not here to win you," Elias said simply. "I'm here to understand." Aravex nodded. "You're the first being who made me feel understood." She turned away, looking up at the twin moons. "I've ruled alone for so long that I began to believe I was meant to stay alone." Elias stepped beside her. "You don't have to be alone," he said gently. "You just have to choose differently." That night, Queen Aravex stood at her window again. This time, she felt the weight of possibility. For the first time, she considered something she had never allowed before, call and trust, and maybe even something more. The twin moons of Virelia 7 glowed red and silver above the palace spires. Inside the launch bay, the Queen's flagship Radiant Aegis waited like a giant blade of crystal and steel. Its engines pulsed with quiet power, ready for a dangerous journey. Queen Aravex stood at the boarding ramp. Her white armor caught the moonlight, turning her into a living statue. Behind her, officers hurried with datapads and supply crates. Yet her eyes stayed fixed on one person, Captain Elias Ward. He walked toward the ship wearing a dark flight jacket, a small pack over one shoulder, and a new silver badge on his chest, the Queen's own crest. He had accepted her invitation to act as military advisor on a sudden diplomatic mission where they were going. Titles might not save them one. A journey into hostile space, 3 rival empires had called for a peace summit on the neutral moon Lacera Prime. In truth, a trap of words and hidden daggers. The rivals wanted to see if Aravex had become weak since the human arrived. Rumors of her soft heart were spreading like fire. Aravex knew all of this and still went. She would show strength, but in a new way. She would bring Elias, not as a bodyguard, but as proof that she could choose trust, not fear. As the ship lifted off, Aravex and Elias stood on the glass command deck. Stars stretched into white lines. As faster than light travel began, Elias glanced at the navigation map. "We will cross 3 border checkpoints," he said. "Each could be an ambush," Aravex answered. "Our shields can hold. Our purpose must hold stronger." Elias nodded. "Purpose is harder to break than metal, if the crew believes in it." She noticed how naturally he spoke to her officers, calm but firm, teaching them new formation drills. He never acted like he was taking control. He simply filled spaces where confidence was thin. The crew began to mirror his steady breathing, his clear commands. Aravex watched and felt a quiet warmth. She realized it was pride not in her empire, but in this lone human standing among her people, too. Sparks before the summit, halfway to Lacera Prime. The flagship dropped from faster than light to pass a required scan zone. For unknown cruisers decloaked, weapons hot, bridge alarms flashed, pilots gripped controls. Yet Elias stepped forward, voice steady. "Hold fire. Raise frequency Delta 9. Open channel." He spoke calmly to the enemy captain, offering a simple trade. The Radiant Aegis would share medical supplies with border colonies if the cruisers gave safe passage. Surprised, the enemy captain hesitated, then agreed. When the channel closed, Aravex tilted her head. "A bribe? A gesture?" Elias said. "We leave them stronger. They leave us alone. Sometimes mercy is strategic. Aravex felt that quiet storm in her heart again. Strategy wrapped in kindness, she had seen it. Only in him three. The summit of cold flames Lasara Prime was a volcanic moon, surface black glass and rivers of glowing lava. The summit hall stood on a suspended platform above the heat, lit by red mist rising from the cracks below. Delegates from the Syrian Horde, the Zentha Collective, and the Caste Dominion waited inside a circle of jagged thrones. Their armor was sharp, their smiles sharper. Aravex entered first, cloak flowing like liquid light. Laius walked one step behind at her right, hands relaxed but eyes mapping every shadow. The meeting began with formal greetings. Words were polite. Tones were not. Syrian warlord Kiran leaned forward, metal claws tapping his chair. Queen Aravex, why bring a human toy to a table of rulers? Before Aravex spoke, Elias answered, voice calm. I am no toy, am her witness. Speak truth, and you will never feel my shadow. The hall went silent, then erupted in low mutters. Aravex's lips curved not quite a smile, but close. She let negotiations continue. For hours they traded offers, trade corridors, science pacts, borderlines. Every time insults flashed, Elias cooled them with a firm glance or a simple question. What do your children gain from this war? The question cut through pride like a blade through smoke. Slowly, the treaty draft formed. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible, and possibility was power for. Fire and betrayal just before signatures. The hall lights died. Explosion, smoke, shouts. Hidden saboteurs, Strook armored, mercenaries loyal to none, hired to end the summit in blood. Chaos erupted. Delegates scattered. Lasers lit the dark. Elias moved first. In one motion, he shoved Aravex down behind a fallen pillar, covering her with his own body. A plasma bolt struck his shoulder, burning cloth and skin. He didn't cry out. He simply pushed her deeper into cover. Aravex felt terror, feeling new and fierce. It's not for herself, but for him. He looked at her, pain in his eyes, yet calm on his face. Stay low, he whispered, then stood to return fire with a fallen guard's rifle. Aravex rose beside him. Energy blades formed at her wrists, elegant arcs of blue light. She fought with lethal grace, but her eyes kept flicking. To Elias, tracking his steps, his wounds. Together, they drove the mercenaries back. Zentha drones joined the defense, impressed by Elias's bravery. Caste Dominion snipers covered flanks. Even the Syrian warlord roared approval. The attackers fled or fell into the lava rivers below. Silence returned, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal. Elias dropped to one knee, bleeding. Aravex knelt instantly, pressing a glowing patch to his wound. Her hands trembled another first. A caste medic approached, but Aravex snapped, I will do it. Her voice cracked raw with fear. The medic stepped back in shock. Elias smiled weakly. Your Majesty, you're scaring them. Let them be scared, she whispered, tears shining like stars in her silver eyes. 5. Mask unbroken, yet changed later, in the moon's medical bay. Delegates gathered to finish the treaty. Aravex stood before them, eyes bright but steady. Today, she said, a human bled for rulers of worlds not his own. Remember that, before you decide your next war. She signed the treaty first. One by one, the others followed. The alliance of Lasara was born in agreement, forged by fire, mercy, and shared courage. When it was done, Aravex returned to Ilias's bedside. He was resting, shoulder wrapped in healing bandages. He opened his eyes. Did we win? She sat. Beside him, yes, and so did they. He studied her face. You're different. She exhaled slowly. I feel ... lighter, as if I finally stepped into the wind instead of against it. Elias nodded. That's trust. She reached out, letting her hand rest over his. Heal fast, Captain. The galaxy just changed, and I need you to see it. With me, for the first time, the Queen of Silence allowed herself a small, true smile. Queen Aravex stood on the balcony of her palace, looking over the shining city of Virelia 7. The twin moons hung high in the sky. The crystal towers below glowed softly in the night. Everything looked peaceful from up here. But deep inside, the palace walls, a storm was building. Since the treaty on Lasara Prime, things had changed. The Queen's choice to bring a human soldier to the summit, and the fact that she fought beside him, had shaken the Empire's foundation. Some citizens called her brave. Others called her weak. Her closest advisors whispered behind closed doors. The High Lords of the Military Council were no longer silent. They believed Queen Aravex had gone too far. Trusting an outsider, especially a human, was dangerous in there. Eyes in a private chamber lit by golden flames. Secret meeting took place. Lord Vecran, one of the oldest generals of the Exari Empire, stood at the center of the table. "The Queen has changed," he said coldly. "She risks our traditions." For one man, a human, others nodded. She allowed him into the Council of Stars. She chose him over our own warriors. She bleeds beside him. She smiles at him. "This is not the Queen we swore to follow." Then came the final words from Vecran. "If she will not protect the Empire from weakness, we will." Back in her chambers, Aravex sat by a glowing firestone, thinking. Elias was recovering slowly. His wound from the attack had been deep, but he was strong. His calm spirit still echoed through the palace halls, but Aravex could feel the change around her. The palace felt colder, the halls more silent. She called for her AI advisor. "Monitor internal signals. Want to know if any hidden communications are being sent from within my council." The AI's soft voice replied, confirmed. "Multiple encrypted signals detected. All trace back to General Vecran's wing." Aravex closed her eyes, so it was true. Later that night, Elias sat on the edge of his bed. His shoulder still hurt, but he was well enough to walk. When Aravex entered his chamber, he stood slowly. "You should rest," she said softly. "Rested enough?" he replied. "You're troubled." She nodded. "There's a rebellion starting. From my own people. I think I've grown weak. Because I trust you." Elias looked into her eyes. "Do you regret trusting me?" She said without hesitation. "But I fear for what it may cost." He stepped closer. "And let me stand beside you again. Not as your guard, not as your guest, but as your ally." She smiled, but her voice was serious. "If you do this, Elias, they may try to kill you again." He simply answered, "Then they'll see I won't fall so easily." The next day, the Queen called for a formal council assembly in the Hall of Balance of Place, where emperors had stood for centuries to face crisis and judgment. The room was full. Every general, noble, scientist, and elder sat in silence as Aravex entered. She wore her battle armor shining silver with sharp blue lines. Her crown was simple, her gaze sharp. Beside her, Elias stood in his black uniform. No armor, no weapons, just presence. Whispers spread like fire. Lord Vecran stepped forward. "My Queen," he said loudly, "we gather today not in disrespect, but in fear. The fear that you have turned away from our strength and opened your heart to a world of danger." Aravex raised her hand. "You fear because you do not understand," she said. "You think trust is weakness? You think connection brings failure?" She pointed to Elias. "But this man has shown us that trust can hold a shield, and mercy can sharpen a blade." Gasps filled the room. Vecran shouted, "Then you no longer deserve the crown." He pulled a hidden blade from his robe. Chaos erupted. 3 soldiers loyal to Vecran charged toward the Queen. Elias moved first, grabbing one by the arm, flipping him down. Aravex struck the second with a flash of her energy blade. The 3rd soldier raised a blaster, but before he could shoot, a surprise came. Another council member, a quiet female noble, stepped forward and blocked the attack with a hidden force shield. More soldiers from both sides poured into the hall. A full rebellion had begun inside the palace, but something unexpected happened. Not everyone turned against the Queen, in fact. Half of them fought for her. Young officers who had seen her change, scientists who believed in unity, even a few old warriors who saw something new in her eyes. They stood with Aravex and Elias, fighting not for tradition but for hope. The battle lasted 2 hours. Elias fought through pain, his old wound burning but his focus clear. Aravex fought with grace and power, defending her throne not with anger but with purpose. At the end, Vecren was captured. His followers were scattered or surrendered. The queen stood over him. "You speak of strength," she said coldly. "Yet you fell because you could not see the strength in change." She turned away. That evening the palace was quiet again. Elias sat on the balcony with Aravex. Both were bruised and tired. "You've won," he said softly. She looked at him. "We've changed. And that is harder than winning." Elias leaned back against the rail. "Do you think your people will accept this new path?" "Some will," she said. "Others will not. But it's not their choice alone anymore." She reached out and gently took his hand. "I used to reject the galaxy. Now I'm starting to see what it truly holds." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "And what do you see?" She smiled, warm and true. "You." The morning light on Varelia 7 felt different. It wasn't just the rising suns or the clean air after the battle. It was something deeper, something new. The empire, once ruled by silence and fear, was beginning to breathe again, inside the palace. Queen Aravex stood in her private chamber, gazing into a mirror of soft crystal. Her silver crown rested on a table beside her. Today, she would not wear it. Today, she would stand not just as a ruler, but as a voice. Across the hall, Captain Elias Ward adjusted the collar of his black ceremonial coat. His shoulder still ached from the fight, but the wound had almost healed. The palace doctors said he was lucky to be alive. He didn't feel lucky. He felt ... ready. The queen entered the grand forum of worlds where leaders from across the galaxy had gathered. The rebellion had failed, but it had left scars. Rumors flew across systems about the human who had stood beside the queen, about the queen herself changing, breaking tradition. Some had come in fear, others in curiosity. A few in quiet hope. They all waited to hear what the queen would say. Elias stood at her side, not behind her, not in front, but next to her, where equals stood. The hall fell silent. Aravex looked over them, not coldly, not with pride. She simply looked at them as people. Then she spoke. "Long ago," she said, "I believed silence was strength. I ruled with logic, order, and control. I closed my heart to the galaxy because I believed it was filled with weakness." She paused, but then came a voice I could not ignore. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. A soldier, a human. A man who showed courage not through battle, but through compassion. Her gaze moved toward Elias for a moment. "This man, Captain Elias Ward, changed me. And now I stand before you not as the queen who rejects, but as the queen who listens." There was a stillness in the room. No one moved. No one interrupted. "I will not return to old silence," she said firmly. "I will build something new, not a galaxy ruled by fear, but one shaped by unity." Some delegates exchanged glances. Others leaned forward. No one looked away. "I invite all worlds, all species, to speak with Min, as servants, not as beggars, but as partners. We will not erase the past, but we will choose what comes next." She stepped back. Elias looked out at the crowd and spoke only one sentence. "We are stronger together." The message spread across systems faster than any warship. Galaxies that had once feared the queen now sent messages of alliance. Former enemies asked for talks. Refugee colonies requested protection. Scientists offered to share discoveries. A great change had begun, and at the center of it stood a queen who once trusted no one, and a soldier who never asked for trust but earned it anyway. Days later, in a quiet garden inside the palace, Aravex and Elias sat alone. The sun was low, the sky painted with orange and silver. Aravex placed a soft crystal flower in the soil beside her. It glowed gently. "It's from my childhood," she said. "This flower only grows when placed with care, not force." Elias watched it bloom. "Like peace," he said. They sat in silence for a while. Not the kind of silence Aravex once used to protect herself, but the kind that spoke of comfort. "You've changed this empire," she said softly. "No," Elias replied. "You changed yourself. I was just there to remind you that you could." She turned her eyes to him. "There is something I must ask you." He nodded. "Go on." She looked serious, but her voice was gentle. "Stay." Elias blinked. "Here, on Varelia, with me," she said. "It's not as my guard, not as my guest, but as my companion. I want you here when we shape the future." Took a deep breath. He looked at the palace, the stars, then at her. "I thought you'd never ask." She smiled, and this time, it wasn't just small or quiet, it was full. A month later, the first United Galaxy Forum was formed a council. Where species spoke as equals, Elias stood as the Earth's chosen voice. Aravex led not as a ruler above others, but as a guide among them. The soldier and the queen became symbols of something greater. What happens when walls break and hearts open? In one of the palace's tall towers, Aravex kept a simple painting. A scene of two figures standing under starlight, one with silver skin, the other in black armor, side by side. Visitors often asked what it meant. The queen would only say, "It's the moment everything began," because sometimes one soldier's silence is louder than 1,000 armies, and one queen's trust can change the stars.